Guten Abend, meine sehr liebe Hanna, Kollegin und Freundin und Mensch, liebe Gäste, meine sehr geehrten Damen und Herren. Es ist sehr leer, es hat unter anderem mit der Situation im öffentlichen Verkehr zu tun. Wir haben von verschiedenen gehört, die gerne gekommen wären, dass sie irgendwo nicht vorankommen und blockiert sind. Vielleicht füllt sich das auch im Laufe des Abends. Mein Name ist Bénédicte Savoy, ich sage in der Regel nur Guten Tag, das war's, Guten Tag, und gebe das Wort, das Mikrofon an die Kuratorin dieser Reihe. Das ist Julie Hoang, die gleich ins Englische switchen wird und unsere schöne Runde begrüßen wird. Lee, du hast das Wort.
Thank you. Thank you, Benedict. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am Li Huang. I am the co-curator of this event series, together with Freya Schwachenwald, who is unfortunately not here tonight. But as usual, she sent us a video message, and so we can start the video message. And she will introduce you more into tonight's topic, which is really dedicated to our dear colleague Hannah Rudik, who is on the panel tonight, and whose work, and all the panelists' works, it is really.
Hello and welcome. I am Freya Schwachenwald. I am one of the co-curators of the event series KuK Tuesdays Dislocation, together with Julie Huang, who is other than me with you tonight. But I'm very happy that I can at least send this little video message to welcome you all tonight. Tonight is really, I would say, a very special evening because it really shows the diversity of our institute in terms of research topics, but also shows how much the theme or the topic of dislocation really resonates through all of our work. So tonight has really been the result of conversations that we have had actually after the first KuK Tuesdays that Lee and I organized together. We talked to our dear colleague Hannah Rudik, who has been with us for around 2 years now. And we talked about her work and what dislocation means to her in her research, and of course also in the situation that that Ukraine is in now, since not the least the last 2 years with the Russian aggression against Ukraine, but basically also with a further look back into history. And so this night is really basically Hannah's night, who has been really putting so much work into bringing together these wonderful panelists and really conceptualizing the whole evening. So I also want to, and I think this is also what Lee will be saying, say a great thank you, not only to you, Hannah, but also to Maria, Katarina, and Laura, who are here tonight to lead you through the evening. And I'm going to not talk much longer, and of course leave the discussion to them, and hope that you will have a great evening and enjoy the talk and enjoy exchanging on this very particular topic on the meaning of dislocation in Ukrainian museum history, but also cultural history, museum policies, and of course society and art at large. Thank you very much, and I hope you will have a great evening.
Now it's my This is for you, Freya, if you are watching online. And now it's my task to introduce our wonderful moderator for tonight, Laura Rosengarten. We're very happy that you are here. Laura Rosengarten is a doctoral candidate at the University of Leipzig. Under the working title, The Struggle for a New Realism, Art Transfer Between the GDR, Italy and France, 1951 to 1955, Exhibitions, Artworks, Dispute, her doctoral project focuses on the triangle of East Berlin, Rome, and Paris, and is dedicated to the cultural transfer to the early 1950s across the borders of the so-called Iron Curtain. Laura worked as a scientific assistant as well as an exhibition curator at Lindenau Museum Altenburg and at Handschriftenzentrum of the University of Leipzig. Since January 2022, she has been a scholarship holder of Rosa Luxemburg Stiftung, and her latest publication this year dealt with the Italian painter Renato Guttuso and his relations to the GDR. And without further ado, I give the floor to you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Lee, and thank you, Freya, also for this great invitation. I will just switch to the first slide. And before I give the word to the panelists, to Hanna Rudik, Maria Silina and Katarina Lisovenko, I will shortly say some words to frame today's topic. To make it transparent, I'm not sitting here as an expert, but more as a mediator between an audience that might be not completely familiar with Ukraine and a panel of experts who are directly affected by and or dealing with the Ukrainian case within their museological, theoretical, art historical, and artistic research. As today's topic, Dislocation, Liminality and Resilience, the case of Ukraine, is indeed very complex, oftentimes completely underestimated in Western countries, and also very emotional. I'm very thankful that you are all here and that you are ready to give us insights in your more often than not troubling work, research and reflections. In our preparatory discussions, among other aspects, we were talking about the media coverage of the ongoing war in the West, precisely in Germany, and we were looking especially at the media coverage that focuses on Ukrainian cultural heritage / history under attack, and realized that the semantics have been shifting within the last 2 years. But before I illustrate what is meant by this shift, I will briefly sum up what we need to have in mind when we talk about Ukraine. Ukraine is a state of Eastern Europe with more than 36 million inhabitants. After Russia, Ukraine is the second biggest state of the European landmass, and it is sharing borders with Russia, Belarus, Poland, Slovakia, Hungary, Romania, Moldavia, and has a huge diaspora spread over many countries of the world. The shores in the south of the country touch the Black Sea and the Sea of Azov. Meanwhile, the land's backbone from the north to the south is the gigantic Dnieper River. Since Russia's annexation of the Crimea and the beginning of the war in Donbas in 2014, Ukraine has been constantly in military conflict with Russia. In February 2022, as we all know, Russia attacked Ukraine as a whole and started the current war. Maybe we all remember that before the 24th of February 2022, Vladimir Putin used, and I cite here my dear colleague Hanna Rudik, who thankfully corrected my indeed very Western perspective on this aspect. Putin used a centuries-old imperial ideological interpretation of Ukrainian history publicly to justify the attack on Ukraine. In front of TV cameras, he told the world that Ukraine actually never really existed as a nation state. Among other aspects, he referred to an old conflict between Stalin and Lenin. Stalin, who was in favor of a centralist Soviet Union on the one side, and Lenin, who theoretically favored a union of independent Soviet republics on the other. Within his speech, Putin called Lenin's idea a major mistake, or even worse than a mistake, and the only reason for Ukrainian independence after 1991. These explanations were a shock for millions of people outside of Ukraine. And now I'm getting back to the shift I was referring to in the beginning. In the first months of the war, the threat for arts and culture as carriers of history and histories were a very constant topic in the media. We could see damaged theaters, churches, libraries, and museums on the news. We were informed about evacuation of museum collections, monitoring, and massive support within Ukraine, but also from the outside. We were remembered of the Hague Convention and the Blue Shield organization that Russia's military has been ignoring completely. Already in February 2022, 40 states within UNESCO condemned the Russian attack on Ukraine, and 1 month later, the Netzwerk Kulturgutschutz Ukraine was founded in Germany. And now, and today, in the meantime, the topic of the Russia-Ukrainian war on the news has become centered much more on strategic, technical, and economic issues. Even though one of the major threats still lies in a Russia-centered historiography and the will to homogenize Ukraine into Russian history. Thankfully, Hannah supplied me with actual numbers of destruction in Ukraine that remember us, or give us a picture of the devastating situation of cultural heritage sites in Ukraine. Destroyed or damaged are 958 creative hubs, 708 libraries, 153 art education institutions, 114 museums and galleries, 36 theaters, cinemas, and philharmonic halls, 15 parks, zoos, reserves, and 3 circuses. That makes a total of 1,987 sites of cultural heritage. Most affected by the destruction is the Donetsk area, but also Kharkiv, Kherson, Luhansk, and Mykolaiv. These numbers I've just cited come from within Ukraine and are published on the website of the Ministry of Culture and Information Policy of Ukraine. They were last updated on the 2nd of May 2024. With these numbers in mind, in today's session, we will look at the Ukrainian case and talk, among other aspects, about dislocation, liminality, resilience, colonialism, imperialism, and ideology. Firstly, I would like to introduce to you Hannah Rudik, who is providing us with a historiographical perspective on the Ukrainian case, and will also present one specific story of resilience within the modern history of Ukraine. Hannah holds a PhD and is a Ukrainian museum historian, curator, and educator. Since 2002, she has been curating the collection of Islamic art at the National Kanenko Museum in Kiev, where she developed the permanent exhibition and several temporary exhibitions and publications. The last book edited and co-authored by Rudik is called Art of Asia and the Islamic World, the Kanenko Museum collection, and was published in January 2024. And in 2011, sorry, I have to turn my page, she took on the role of the museum's deputy director for public programming and communicating, focusing on accessibility and participative practices. In April 2022, due to Russia's full-scale invasion, Rudik relocated to Berlin with her 2 minor children to start research on the decolonial transformation of non-European heritage museums, a project supported by the Department of Art History as Cultural History here at the TU Berlin. After completing her research in September 2024, Rudik intends to return to Ukraine. Please, Hannah, the stage is yours.
How can I switch? Yeah. So just click this.
One is the next one, slide.
Okay, yeah.
This one, and then this forwards, this backwards.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Laura, for your kindest presentation and for that you agreed to moderate our Ukrainian session. And thank you all for coming today to this Ukrainian event within Dislocation's program, which I find really particularly relevant and productive format of transdisciplinary exchange and learning about history of art and history of culture. Thank you all those who conceived and organized and is organizing this very good program, and particularly to Li, Huang and Freya Schwachenwald, who once asked me if I would like to think about the Ukrainian discussion. Thank you. I will be trying to stick to my notes because, yes, my intention is to offer you a kind of, as Laura said, historiographical framework for reading the Ukrainian case, and also to present briefly the one of specific cases of liminality and resilience, which I personally find really interesting from Ukrainian modern history, and telling about the specificity of Ukrainian coloniality and resilience. Platform in Ukraine today is literally vital, meaning life-saving issue, along with military, political, economic support of Ukraine. Due to Ukraine's complex colonial entanglement in the history of the Russian imperial, Soviet and post-Soviet political and epistemic orders that systematically silenced and slandered Ukraine, Ukraine is still very poorly known, barely heard, and misunderstood. In this introductory presentation, as I said, yes, I will speak about historiography first and then go on to the Hanenko case. The framework I'd like to suggest is built on the concept of liminality. Yes, liminality, coined by anthropologists to designate the ambiguity, anxiety, and disorientation experienced by a human in the rites of passage. The notion was extrapolated to the social and political theory, where it became a leading paradigm for understanding human experience in situations that fall between defined structures and have uncertain outcomes. The concepts of liminality and a liminal state resonate with the philosophical concept of limit experience or a boundary situation, Grenzsituation, introduced by Karl Jaspers in 1935 and taken up by later existentialists. So it's quite a well-known concept in different disciplines, in different spheres of thought. I think no one would doubt that Ukraine is living now through the time of extreme existential liminality. People in Ukraine are being daily killed, raped, displaced. Our culture is being daily destroyed. We are drowning in the flood of death, grief, and melancholy. We are overwhelmed with compounded loss. Our lives being falling apart. A week ago, the major Ukrainian yearly book and literary festival, the book Arsenal, was taking place in Kyiv with the key theme, Life on the Edge. Here you see its poster. Ukrainians are living on the edge in an extremely exhausting, joy of life sucking condition. But Also, it is a condition of radical self-reflection, calling a spade, seeing and speaking complex truths, dramatic transformative maturation. Ukrainians' rite of passage. The relevance of the liminality as a tool for reading the Ukrainian case is mediated through the concept of the frontier, one of the key explanatory metaphors in the modern and contemporary historiography of Ukraine. Frontier, or a borderland, is a space between and betwixt some different big social and symbolic systems, a place where two or more big orders meet and clash. Frontiers are spaces of continuous, lasting liminality. Since the 19th century, romantic geofatalist theories have been explaining Ukraine's dramatic history through its very geography on the frontier of steppe and forest, nomadic and sedentary livelihoods. Ukraine was seen as a border, or a guard of a border, of a certain ordered world, the Western, or the European, the Christian, the Slavic, etc. In the 20th century, the meta-narrative of Ukraine as a great frontier of Europe was crystallized in Ukrainian diasporic historiography. Actively taken up in the 1990s by historians of the independent Ukraine, it was recently reworked into a concept of Ukraine as a multi-frontier, as a zone of a simultaneous overlap and interpenetration of multiple contact fields between big opposing social and semantic systems. While the concept of frontier and its constant liminality may serve to explain the long-time statelessness of Ukraine and its history of a bloodlands of Europe, to cite Timothy Snyder, bloodlands of Europe, they can hardly explain why Ukraine and its culture still exist, or solve a puzzle of the amazing, remarkable, feisty, indomitable resilience of Ukraine in the current war. My main thesis is that the case of Ukraine is not only about frontierness and the permanent liminality, but no less about overcoming these conditions by developing a new order, a new center on the frontier. And the amazing resilience of Ukrainians in this war, the fact that Ukraine didn't fall in 3 days, as it was planned in Moscow, that it fights and will keep fighting back, has its solid foundations in Ukrainian past. The past we Ukrainians do not know yet well, but today at least we know much better why we don't know our history, and we make great efforts to dig it up. The case of Hanenka I will briefly discuss now is based on my colleagues and my own latest archival research. So we will go back in history to the beginning of the 20th century, and I will sketch for you briefly the historical context of this period. In the late 18th century, the vast majority of Ukrainian lands that made up the territory of this Cossacks state lost its autonomy and became part of the Russian Empire. It was since then that the systematic relocation of cultural heritage from Ukraine to Russia started, backed not only by general awareness of the political weight of history and antiquities, but by Russia's well-realized need to tame Ukraine as its most economically sustainable and culturally advanced province. Collecting rich Ukrainian heritage was the key prerequisite for rewriting Russia's and Ukraine's histories from imperial perspective. The extraction of cultural resources reached enormous proportions. All sensational archaeological findings on the territory of the Russian Empire of the 19th, early 20th century, like the gold and silver from the Scythian mounds, or treasures of the ancient Greek and Roman, Persian, Byzantine, and Old Rus civilizations that were excavated in Ukraine, were immediately transferred to St. Petersburg and placed in the Imperial Hermitage or distributed to the Armory and the Historical Museum in Moscow. In 1859, the Imperial Archaeological Commission was established to administrate the process. Besides, the empire supported its central museums financially. This organized plundering of heritage, not only of archaeology and ancient art, but also of manuscripts and incunabula, historical military and state regalia, liturgical relics, memorabilia, and the whole archives of Ukrainian historical figures. Indeed, it was a comprehensive cultural plundering, was complemented in the second half of the 19th century by the empire's harsh assault on the Ukrainian language and cultural identity. It included arrests and exiles of leading intellectuals and public figures, a complete ban on the Ukrainian language in schools, liturgy, press, book printing, etc. A ban on public museums of local history and culture, permitted for other provinces, but not for Ukraine. There is no need for such an institution. In these exactly words, imperial government refused in 1880s to allow organize in Kyiv a public museum of local history. This was the moment when Bogdan Khanenko appeared on the stage. He was a particularly liminal figure, a personality with multiple overlapping identities, a descendant of an ancient noble lineage of Ukrainian statesmen and intellectuals. He studied in Moscow and then lived, worked, and fell in love with old art in St. Petersburg. After marrying Varvara Tereshchenko, member of the clan of Ukraine's richest sugar magnates, he eventually became an exemplar of Western art collectors with his own network of dealers and consultants, including such luminaries of art history as Wilhelm von Bode, Hofstede de Groot, Abraham Bredius, and others. After a decade of traveling around Europe, he settled in Kyiv, where he immediately became a leader of the local cultural elite. In 1896, he headed the museum committee, and from this position managed to obtain the long-cherished permission for a museum personally from the Russian emperor. In addition, 100,000 rubles were granted from the imperial treasury for the museum building. And in 2 years, the museum opened its doors to visitors presenting Ukraine's own rich history and Ukrainian culture as a distinct phenomenon. Here you can see one of the first pictures of this museum. And here you can see the first exhibitions. The one on Ukrainian archaeology. The Khanenkos donated there more than 3,000 objects from the Stone Age on, and on the Ukrainian folk art. This was an unimaginable breakthrough in the political context of the time. How did Khanenko achieve it? And how a decade later did he dare to plan another museum to be opened in Kyiv, a museum of world art destined to tell not local but global history from Kyiv? A kind of museum that only imperial metropolises, Moscow and Petersburg, had the exclusive right to have. Here you see the Khanenko's private museum of world art, which from 1919 became a state museum. So this project has been implemented. My answer would be Khanenko overcame the liminality of his time and place. Acting on both sides of the colonial divide in two incompatible worlds, the anti-Ukrainian world of St. Petersburg and the pro-Ukrainian world of Kyiv, he instrumentalized one system for the needs of the other. At the Russian court, he perfectly played by its rules, presenting himself as an impeccable little Russian. This is how Ukrainians were categorized within this imperial Russian myth of three-un nation. Russian nation. Great Russians, Little Russians, Ukrainians, and Belarusians. He was Russian-speaking and a member and adorer of dozens of imperial organizations, a delegate to the Russian parliament, a member of the Russian monarchist party, and a Petersburg's Freemason lodge. It is hard to imagine a more pro-imperial official record than his. Besides, Khanenko used every occasion to present his emphasized loyalty. He anticipated royal desires, flattered and plainly bribed the imperial family to gain still more favor and trust and to become, in the eyes of the empire, its most reliable pillars. You can go back for a second here and see how the Ukrainian Local History Museum and Culture was named Emperor Nikolai Alexandrovich Art, Industrial and Scientific Museum. And it was the initiative of Bogdan Khanenko to name it like that. And exactly at the same time in Kyiv, he was the driving force behind grandiose, unthinkable changes. The collections of world heritage the Khanenkos accumulated in Kyiv, protected to stay in Kyiv, and bequeathed to Kyiv, The public museums, they found it, I say they, because actually they acted together, him and her, Bogdan and Varvara Khanenko. But he was, as it used to be in that period of history in the Russian Empire, he was publicly known. He acted in all official organizations and events, but actually they were doing that together. And all other changes they introduced and supported turned Kyiv within 2 decades from a culturally desolate colonial town into a city of modern knowledge and culture. Of course, Khanenko was not the only one to make these changes, but he was one of key drivers of them due to his great resources. But above all, because of the choices he seemed to make in that liminal grand situation for an identity that we can call today a Ukrainian identity. His strategy of resilience was ingeniously complex and hybrid, but it proved a winning strategy. I'm sure that the Ukrainian statehood project of the 1917-1921 and the bright flowering of Ukrainian academic science and avant-garde culture in the 1920s rested on cultural foundations installed and institutionalized in Kyiv by the Khanenkos. The Soviet authorities obviously realized it very well too, which is why the Khanenkos archives were lost already in 1922, and in some years their very names were forbidden to be mentioned. And to wrap up, I will show you the Khanenko Museum now, very shortly. The museum was opened in 1918 by Varvara Khanenko. Bogdan Khanenko has passed away in 1917, and she bequeathed the museum to the city of Kyiv and opened it already during the Bolsheviks' occupation of Kyiv in 1919 in their mansion. And this museum has been working until now, with only 3 years break during the Second World War and about 3 months break during the current war. And it keeps working despite the war and in radical opposition to it, by doing curators' talks in the emptied galleries of the Khanenko's exquisite villa, conducting weekend family workshops, engaging in the Pride Months program, presenting new publications on the book arsenal, etc., between Russian daily air raids on Kyiv, by overcoming liminality.
Thank you so much, Hannah, for these rich insights. And I will switch to the next person who quickly had to leave, but they will come back in a second. Oh, Maria's back. Next on the podium is Maria Silina, who is also providing us with a historiographical perspective, but will explore more on the Soviet museum management, on lootings until today, and the current provenance research that has been done. Maria also holds a PhD and is an adjunct professor in the Department of History of Art at Université du Québec, Montreal in Canada, and a research fellow at Ruhr-Universität Bochum in Germany. Dr. Silina participates in several research projects on communist culture and museum studies, most importantly in a collaborative project focusing on restitution requests and irregular displacements and alienations of museum objects in the Soviet Union. Their book, Art History on Display, Soviet Museology Between Two Wars, 1920s to 1930s, will be published next year. Hopefully, okay. Yeah, I'm quite sure. So, Maria, I give the word to you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I will try to make it in 10 minutes. So, let's start with the presentation. And so Hanna talked already about strategies of resilience and assimilation that Ukrainian intellectuals and activists needed to do. And so I will now show you how after the 1917 revolution, the Soviet Union adapted the imperial strategies that Hanna was talking about and made them even more effective, functional, nuanced, and actually built the whole, infrastructure to control museums, to make them to make universal Soviet socialist culture. And even though, of course, there had been a lot of socialist elements of this new endeavor, the infrastructure was really like neo-imperial infrastructure, and I will be talking about it. So, and I'm just briefly showing you this map. Hanna also already mentioned that Ukraine, we know from global historiography about the Russian Revolution of 1917, but in fact, you see this map, these are different territories, countries, regions, communities that had been struggling for their independence after 1917. And so we actually have all the regions that were historically under the rule of the Russian Empire. They, at some point after the revolution of 1917, started a renewed process of trying to get their independence. And so it was not an event. It actually was a very, very, very important struggle of these countries and communities, but also the Bolsheviks made sure that everything will be under control. And as I said already, even under a more nuanced and sophisticated way to control things. So, and the Soviet management system was built by Soviet Russia. So the federal body, the major imperial, the leading imperial power in the region. Because imperial scholars, Russian scholars, were the most active, the most educated, they had the most control, and the Soviet museum management system was built as a highly functional system that enabled a perpetual alienation of cultural heritage of non-Russian regions for sake of the creation of the universalist Soviet socialist culture. And as Hanna already mentioned, they had been before the revolution, there had been massive dispatches and massive displacements of archaeological findings. This is a very, very, classical imperialist story of any region, and so these alienations continued into the revolution. And I will be talking about it a little bit. But in general, the system that Soviet Russia mounted within several decades after the revolution, despite the collapse of the Soviet Union, all countries that were under control of the Soviet Union still managed their museums more or less in the way the Soviet Russia and the Soviet Union proposed it after the revolution. And of course, the Soviet Union also influenced a lot of other countries globally, like China, Cuba, many other countries, the way they see the museum system. So, but what was the system? What was the system of control? Several events were very important. First of all, nationalization without compensation, nationalization of private property that made possible to build a complex museum management system and museum network under control of Russia. So nationalization meant, physically objects were taken away from the private collections, from the wealthy residency, from the churches, from the other corporate owners like the army, for example. And they were physically displaced to reservoirs. And then Russian scholars mostly, because of course the first process of nationalization happened in the large national capitals like St. Petersburg, Russian scholars started to reevaluate objects and also recategorize them. And as you might imagine, the way how an imperial scholar might reevaluate objects from, all other settler colonial, so to say, regions, right? So, of course, for example, if we take Crimea, that is temporarily occupied by Russia, it was a place of Muslim indigenous population, and as you might imagine, the possessions of Crimean Tatars were, it is Islam culture, right? So they were evaluated as decorative objects or objects that belong to historical museums, whereas Russian Orthodox icons, or not necessarily Russian, but Orthodox icons, were of course reclassified as high arts, even though there were debates about it, and they were placed in art galleries of European art. They are not European art in terms of classic academic education. Katerina will be talking about this element of imperial violence. But still, I mean, this was the process that happened within the first decades. And then not only objects, actually also museums. So former private collections or municipal or museums of certain territories, they had been also recalibrated. And Russia, they were again, Soviet Russia, that was the most active agent in modernizing museum system, because it was the modernization and rationalization of the whole, cultural heritage production. Because the idea was that we need to implement new scholarly and scientific standards to this chaotic, messy private collections. So scholars were very, very eager to participate in this remaking. So, and you see, so the major thing is that with Russian settler colonialism is that museums were recalibrated according to two value system. Western European art was valued as the highest art, and then Russian national art was the second rate, but second first, top rated, creation, and all other non-Russian, non-Orthodox possessions were reclassified to the museums of Oriental art in some places, in some wealthy, large museums, or Oriental or decorative museums. And Hanna talked about Hanenko Museum, and for example, the family also collected Russian art or Ukrainian art, or like they were not really focused on specifically on global art. Of course, as any collector, you work with art market that you have. And after the nationalization, the museum needed to dispatch all other non-profiled objects to some other museums. So what we have, and already also another very interesting thing, museums and private collections were actually made into these bureaucratic administrative units, because there were also very important territorial reforms, and there had been a lot of different border divisions. So in many situations, collections needed to travel 2,000 kilometers to some other region because of this bureaucratic shifts in administration. So today, for example, a lot of people, and after the collapse of the Soviet Union, Russia had this argument that because of this territorial border divisions, you cannot claim territorial rights over this specific collections, because it was remade many times. So it means that. Okay, so it means that so when this nationalization process and remaking of the whole infrastructure happened, countries, again, like Ukraine, for example, Hanna mentioned this, they started actually, first of all, trying to get their objects that were alienated by the imperial Russia back. So we have restitution requests from Ukraine, from Turkestan back to the 1920s, so like 100 years ago. It is very important because today, with this new imperialist, extractivist activities of Russia, so with this new war, Ukrainian colleagues, but also historians who work with imperialist history, it became very important that we need to talk about this history as a systemic event, because we have restitution requests, we have all this very, very clear, patterns of imperialist restructuring of the whole collections, even back then. So, and it became clear that we need to do this, and moreover, okay, no, this is not this. Yes, and we need to collaborate on this, because you cannot. I work with Federal Russian Archives, so I have a very, very imperialist, central-oriented history of this. Hanna works with her collection. It's very, very important to kind of match our expertise on this. But what I wanted to say, because Soviet Union was so active in all military punitive campaigns all over the place, this history of nationalization is not something that is isolated to this region, because, for example, I will give you only one example. When we are looking at history of nationalization and the way how the objects were dispatched, we can think about, for example, about the World War II and 1945, when the Soviet army dispatched a lot of packed, reclassified, and transported a lot of objects from Germany and neighboring countries, and it was done within several months. And this was done within several months because before that, Russian scholars and museum practitioners, they had this, very, very material and very direct experience of doing the same, dispatching, keeping, transporting, recirculating objects in the 1920s and the 1930s. So it's not an isolated history. And I'm going back to this slide. But today, with this new imperialist, war, when it became clear that Russia won't keep it like this, it will the empire back, right? What we have. Scholars today work with several concepts, like we have war-related concept, but it's not matching to this larger imperial image. We have restitutions to overseas colonies, Western European colonies, but it's materially and in terms of dynamics and hierarchies, it's a very, very different situation because Russia is a settler colonial state. We have settler colonial state with indigenous communities, but again, it's a very, very specific, very limited, segregating definition that we cannot use for the Soviet Empire. And we have some other things, but we do not really have this, we need some kind of a concept that would give us this very, very metaphoric and very visually rich idea that the Russian Empire was something very similar, typical to any empire, but still historical and materially very, very, concrete, and we need to work with this concrete history to claim objects back that were looted within this war, within different historical periods. I think I overstepped my time. So, yeah, okay, thank you so much. This is... It was super interesting.
Yeah, thank you so much for these also troubling insights. But now, last but not least, we welcome the Ukrainian artist Katarina Lysovenko on the podium, who is providing us with a perspective between reflection on history and artistic practice. Katarina studied in Greco's Art College in Odessa, in the National Academy of Fine Art and Architecture in Kiev, and is now part of the class Post-Conceptual Art Practices of Professor Marina Grzinc. Okay, thank you. In Vienna, Austria. Katarina is working in monumental painting, drawing, and text, and is engaging with the study of the relationship between ideology and painting, as well as with the image production of the victim in politics and art. In her work, she is engaging with traditions and inspirations ranging from the past to the present day. Lysovenko regards painting as a language that can be instrumentalized or liberated. So please, Katarina, the stage is yours.
Thanks. So, for me, it's cool. So for me, it's very important to make a little brief, back to history, because I think it will help understand my own and practice and also practice many other artists better. So how I can to switch?
The other way around. This, okay.
Thanks.
No. Oh, yes.
Thanks. So I will start from. I have not many time, but I want to tell about a lot of things. So I start from.
This, yes.
Will you turn it around?
Yeah, appeared. Appeared. art schools and academies in Kiev and Odessa. But I think that these two institutions, they will tell also about Lviv and Kharkiv, because it was similar process in different places. So Odessa Art School, it was founded in 1865, and it's the first art school in the territory of contemporary Ukraine. I have to say it's also it will tell about empire a lot, because now it's hard to imagine how huge ethnic diversity was in Ukraine. So I wanted to say why this art school and art academies appeared. You can say, like, for example, national self-awareness, like somewhere in Czech or somewhere else. It was international self-awareness, because there were people from Greek, from Bulgaria, from like Crimean Tatars and a lot of other people. So Ukrainian were there like one of the others. So it wasn't like a national school things. It was like international art schools. And all these people who were like from national minorities, it's important for me to say, because they were all deported from Odessa in 30s, because they were all blamed in national separatism, and Greek, Bulgarians, even Jews, they were deported from concentration camp before like 2 World War, and the rest of the Jews were eliminated by Nazis. So and Polish people also were deported to Poland and to Siberia. So it was really like huge ethnic cleansing. And now about Odessa, Kyriak Konstanty, it's a Greek. It was he and other person, Ladezhensky, they were a first teacher in Odessa Art College. This Odessa Art College, they were created by international local elites, like also Greeks, Italians, French people, and also Ukrainian and Russian people. So first auditory of this art school, it was children usually of some, some elites or like middle class people. It's a second generation teacher in Odessa Art School. It's a Jew, Theophil Freierman. You can see that he already used modernism in his painting. It's start of 20th century, but actually this people who experimented with modernism in Ukraine, it's from Jews or from Orthodox or from other direction. They usually use it for provide some religions, ideas, and so on. Some you see that Konstanty, he painted mostly like also religions motif and from Orthodox religion, Freierman from like Torah and Old Testament, and then came new generation of artists. Their students, they already were like secular. They already play with art without some religion's background, and it's also important to say why in Odessa this first generation were like a bit religions, because it was more like province, and in Kiev it wasn't like this. All artists there were more like secular. But this Polina Mamicheva-Nuremberg, so she was avant-garde artist, and then interesting that her works they were brought to Palestine by so her works were brought to Palestine for avoiding destroying in this huge censor action after revolution in 13th. So people who ran away from Ukraine, they took away her works too. It's Nikolai Shaluta. Also, he was a teacher in Greco Art School, and it's one of the people who really survived in repressions, because you can see in his work how he tried. I didn't find his earlier work, but it's also it also looks like this, like avant-garde experiments, and then he tried to adapt his works to avant-garde. So he tried to adaptate avant-garde's approach to social realism, because after revolution, artists who survived because they weren't identified like a bourgeoisie, so they tried to help revolution. They really believed in it. They also were eliminated and killed mostly. because they experimented a lot, and it's important to see also that first 10 years after revolution, people really were, in Ukraine, they were like an agent of building this new world. They really believe in it. But in 8 or 9 years, they really were super disappointed because terror became bigger and bigger, and their approaches to adapt art to social realism, they didn't work. And then you see Shelutha, what he did later. So he survived because he really forgot all his old, experiments, and he became like this. And now we came to, it's sad because. So now in 1970s, it was the time of Ukraine, if I remember correctly, it was a Directoria time. Ukraine weren't under Soviet yet. So this Ukrainian scientists and intellectual and artists, they organized academy. Mostly of people who you see in this list, they were killed, except of, I think, Khrushchevsky maybe. Yeah.
He emigrated.
He emigrated. Okay.
Yeah,
so it is Alexander Murashko. You can I see some parallels with Kostandi. Kostandi also were under influence of Impressionism, and Murashko too. But Murashko, I think, was more like bold in it. And he painted a lot. No, he studied in France. He painted a lot, and then he were killed just when Soviet came to Kiev. He were killed just in the street. His wife were known. His wife were called like a wife of enemy of the people. It was enemy of the people. It was a title which will kill you actually if you have it. And she was deported to Siberia. It's a Bogomazov Alexander, also teacher of academy. You can see how experimental he were. He had classes with the students where they. When they really our academy in this time, it was an academy in the level of other academy in the world with really super progressive and interesting program. You can even read it. This program survived, and then you see how Bogomazov tried also adapted himself to new demanding of social realism, because first years. People believed that they can make avant-garde even more avant-garde. They can destroy, they can destroy border between life and art, and they came to, they make incredible, experimental, wonderful art. But then Stalin concentrated power in his hands, and he also made this international progressive idea. He put in the center of them Russian nationalism. New ideology was about supremacy of Russian people and Russian art, and people should not follow other art I don't know how it calls art. Investigations, but think about high examples Russian art, like for example Levitan or Misaedov, Perov, and Ivanov. Also Repin, who was born in Ukraine, but he really was put on this top of social realism. Bogomazov was too experimental, and he was killed too. It's also his masterpiece and too more realistic, but even this was too experimental, and he was killed. This is Kazimir Malevich, who also was a teacher in this academy. And 10 years then he also disappointed in revolution. He fled to I don't remember where, but he fled from some time, and then he returned to Soviet Union. He also tried to adapt his works to social realism. You see this workers, ideal of workers, new subject, blah blah blah. But he also was killed. Yeah, so this appeared in social. This social realism. It was a new system, and this new system really had a huge infrastructure. New intelligent, old intellectual and artists, they were killed. and no, I don't know, some influencer, how we could say now. And then a social system started to build a new subject and the new intellectual. All national diversity also were like removed, and people from villages and little cities, they came to institutes. And the system started from, I don't know, it's like a first class of Mittelschule. Children in 12 years, they came to art school, then they came to art college, then to academy. Then after academy, they also had an infrastructure where they worked afterwards. And this system, what the strange, no, the most strange thing is that the system survived in in contemporary Ukraine when Soviet Union fell. This old teacher, our old teacher, and not very old, but people who worked in academy, they saved their places. It wasn't like illustration or something, because the system also survived not only in academy, but their patrons in some, in politic, somewhere else, they also survived. And the people, they just changed ideology. And problem is that people who learn art now in Ukraine, they also learned this school. Mm-hmm. You just learned how to paint not pioneers, but people in traditional Ukrainian costume or something. So really
Katarina, could I ask you to also talk a little bit about your...
I let you go to my practice. So it was my diploma.
Because we also need to have a look on that.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. I tried to reflect on the situation. It calls again about matter of monumental art. My idea was when you change ideology, you just can put new figure on it with new costumes or something. I tried to show how it actually works. And then my first 2 years after my academy, I tried to reflect this situation with our art. I found all description of ancient Greek paintings. We don't have ancient Greek paintings because it's super fragile, and we have only description. And I tried to draw it with the skills which I got in my academy. Also important to say that Soviets, they appropriated ancient art, and Renaissance, they wanted to say that they're ancestor of high things, and this bourgeoisie, degradation art, and contemporary art, it's just a shit. So they also repeated Nazi rhetoric. Then I wanted to destroy this ideology. I wanted to show hero like a monster who destroy all diversities. Then I wanted to also show how dehumanization work, how you took people and make from monsters and animals from them. And then I wanted to use it during the war. I saw about how to show tragedy, and they saw that the most awful things that they can't to be resurrected. I also use this dehumanization, signs, this marks of dehumanization, which was used in ancient art. When you read about monsters or satyrs or something, it's already first example of dehumanization. And actually, Greek Empire dehumanized Slavs and people who live in Black North Sea. We for them, some who in the past were for them like monsters. And also this thing, the disagreement with this death, also I drew it. And then I took this body in the sport, in totalitarianism, and wanted to also analyze it, innocence, glory, and re-education in totalitarianism, and show it this sport place, which, the same exists in Russia now. Then, for example, this circle from stolen object from different... We actually worked with Marina together. She was my a consultant in this project. All these figures are from Hermitage, and they stolen from different places during Russian monarchy, Soviet time, and contemporary Russia. I even found Syrian coins. Russia came to Syria in 2010, 2011. Already appeared Syrian coins and stuff from Antioch, from Syria, appeared in Hermitage. And this, I understood that stolen objects is awful, but even more awful that the people who actually hold stories, they are eliminated. And some nations who existed in Russia, they didn't exist anymore. We can't read their stories. So I draw this mythological creature from different stories from national minorities and majorities who lived in Ukraine. And this, before I usually draw like this Satyrs and Centaurus very long time, because it shows very good how decommunization work. And then I decided, okay, people know already language of empire, people know about Satyrs and Centaurus, and then decided to draw something from our folklore. In Ukrainian folklore, mermaids, they care about these people. So people are disagree with violence. They were disagree in violence in the past, and they created folklore about mermaids who collect these people and then make them part of their community. And it's post-mortal child. I connected this mermaids idea from folklore who save death. And with the contemporary situation, when Ukrainian people who go to army, you can save your sperm and eggs, and your partner can give birth if you die. So yeah, it's all. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you very much for this insight in your super interesting work. And before we will open the discussion to the audience, I have a couple of questions I would like to pose. Even if the single question is more or less personalized, please feel free, the three of you, to contribute your own reflections and thoughts. I will start from the end. Katarina, you beautifully regard painting as a language, and as the Ukrainian language is central for Ukrainian historiography, I would like to ask you, in what way is the ongoing war affecting language, and more precisely, your artistic work / language?
I think that if you ask about art or about language as such, I mean, if you ask about, for example, art, I think that now people in Ukraine, they try to understand where they were colonized, because, I don't know, actually before war, this connection between Russia and Ukraine, before 2014, was more close, because I don't know, all people in Ukraine, they know Russian, and they went to Shkola Rodko or something like this to learn art. And now people just try to this separation really now in much bigger level, and people try to find new language how to describe war. And many people also turn to folklore or to mythology. Everybody try to speak about bodies.
So, and that is why you speak also a lot about bodies in your work?
Yes, I think that body is very important. Also, I show this totalitarian body. We spoke with my friends. I was born in Soviet Union, and transformation, I felt them in my body. We spoke with my friends that you really see when people in disco or rave dance from post-Soviet countries and from not countries which wasn't under totalitarianism. Totalitarianism just steal your body, your sexuality, and you're like a free. You're like, I don't know. You disciplined body should in the center of totalitarian society. I felt it in my kindergarten. My children already not anymore. But body, it's really something which should be returned in the colonization process. Yeah, in many ways, because it's really for example, ballet. Why ballet so important for totalitarian countries? Because ballet, it's really like has the highest way of discipline, and you in ballet or in the high sport, you doesn't matter. No, you like a person. You have no matter. Matter is only this like a structure in which your body is like put. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Mm-hmm. Would you like to add? Otherwise, I will.
Well, I would only agree about the body, because I was born very long ago and very deep into the Soviet Union, and yes, my body didn't belong to me for very, very long time. I was even at home. I was forbidden to look into the mirror because it was not. it's a waste of time, and it's not good for a proper child, for a proper girl, for an honest girl, for that decent girl to look into the mirror and to stand long. Well, you can look at it into yourself and just make quickly your hair dress, but you shouldn't stay long and enjoy yourself at that moment. So it went also into the family. It was very deep. Not even speaking about the school or sport or all kind of very repressive systems, and my emancipation of my body started very, very late. So I can feel and understand what Katarina says about it, really. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I will pose my next question to you, Maria. You were talking about the Imperial Soviet Museum management, the extraction of objects, and you are also concerned with the seemingly neutrality of institutions like museums. So how would you describe the museum, and what role does a seemingly neutrality of museums play in the Ukrainian case?
Yes, so thank you. So today it's interesting. I will maybe not answer your question directly, but when the war started, this new war, I was wondering because, you know, at least in Western countries and in Canada, what we all kind of been learned, right, is that like in Western countries, we have a lot of critique about museums, right? Because museums are imperial institutions, and we need to kind of get rid of them or dismantle them or to try to make them death and then reburn them somehow. But at the same time, and of course, I mean, what I presented, it is very, very much relevant because when you look at this, you know, imperialist framework, you can see that this is exactly what museums are doing. But at the same time, because I'm in contact with my Ukrainian colleagues, of course, and not only Ukrainian, you can see that in the war, right, museums in Ukraine, they had very, very different, like they still imperial institutions in terms of that, as I mentioned, all institutions in the Soviet Union, they benefited from the nationalization and from this large-scale circulation of objects. But at the same time, because of the war, museums in Ukraine, they had a radically different role, right? Because they became community centers. They became very important even for people to, I mean, when you're surviving, you still need this special place to be a normal human being, right? Not to think about the survival. And survival was also part of this museum program, right? But also this idea that we have something aside the war. It was very important. And I honestly, I don't know how to kind of reconciliate this two different, very radically different perspectives on museums, because all museums still like very dubious institutions. You still don't really know what to do with them in terms of how to correctly, you know, right? So Hanna is working on this, you know, entanglements with imperialism and Oriental gaze in Ukrainian museums right now. So, and in Russia museums were, of course, also took up this idea that we are places that are outside this war military, you know, expansion, and museums actually thrived in Russia after war began, as well as Ukrainian institutions in terms of conceptual thinking, in terms of community building, in terms of, you know, plans and perspectives, clearly a perspective of what to do after the war will be over in terms of how to rebuild this place. But Russian museums also are thriving actually, because they are community centers that try to kind of engage people into non-war activities and non-military activities. So it's not really answering your question, but it's a very puzzling situation, and again, I don't really know how to, you know, how to think about museums in this very, very radically kind of division between bad museums and good museums. I'm sorry, but this is true. Like, I mean,
yeah, I think it was a very good answer to that question, because yeah, it is very, very complicated.
Yeah.
Do you want to add on that?
Please answer.
I mean,
that now Russian, what happened also in Russian museums, that in many museums previous director was hired, and now Russian museums they took part, they really play big role in this ideologization of people. It's not just people came and see some old art. There are a lot of there were even так, это получается у нас экспозиция. Like changing of expositions, that people have to come and see the right things, and old masterpieces were taken away. No, the Russian artist also wrote about it.
Yes, I can add. Right. So it's incredible that the whole museum industry is very quick in terms of how to adapt to this war conditions, because after the war began, immediately within several months, the museum commission of the Russian Federation that was kind of called to collect objects from Ukraine, to build new museums, to elaborate new displays about the war from the Russian point of view. So yes, but I mean, this industry, it was so, hilariously elaborated and nuanced and developed that they immediately started working on all sorts of, projects. But what is interesting is that a lot of large projects, a lot of large museums in Russia, they have double projects. For example, the largest museums in St. Petersburg, they have one exhibition dedicated to the war in history, and another part of this exhibition is dedicated to home, love, and family. So, I mean, it's every time it's a very kind of, not nuanced, but a very, very, comprehensive approach to kind of evoke this military and imperialist feelings, but also to soothe people with saying that we are a very, very peaceful nation that is kind of very happy to share art or culture.
Yeah, I just want to remind all of us that in the first months of war, Petrovsky, the director of the Hermitage, he stated overtly that he supports and his museum supports Putin, and that in this field of culture that Hermitage is also going to make kind of attack on the Western culture or on the world culture. So it's like part of this war, of this special operation, but in the domain of museums and heritage. I don't know in detail what's going on in Russian museums at all, but I know very well that Russian troops occupying Ukraine are all having in their lists museum professionals from the sphere of heritage, with the lists of objects that are to be taken from Ukrainian museums, and these lists are detailed with the topography where in this and that museum this object is situated, and who is responsible, and how this information should be taken from a responsible person in most inhuman and most violent ways. And so this Soviet system, centralized system of information of managing museums is working perfectly during this war for Russia's interests. Yes, and as to the Ukrainian museums, they rapidly, just suddenly became politicized when the war. Slower, this process started already in 2014, but quite slow. There were contacts with former occupied museums and former actual directors of occupied museums. Some of them evacuated collections and evacuated themselves to Ukraine and were integrated into Ukrainian museum situation, museum structure, and did their projects and reopened museums on the territory of Ukraine. But after February 22, rapidly the museum system became politicized, and even in Kyiv, in such a debatable, controversial museum memorial museum of Mikhail Bulgakov, who was a Russian writer born in Kyiv and a very liminal figure, a very problematic figure now for Ukrainian society. This museum, from the museum point of view, museological point of view, it's one of the best museums in Ukraine. It's a fantastic museum. It's a fantastic creative team. And this tells us about this coloniality of a culture, that this fantastic museum team have never really problematized Bulgakov as an imperial figure. And only now they started, only 2 years ago they started, but they immediately started making these camouflage nets for Ukrainian frontline. And engaging people of the district, the community, this part of Kyiv, to come to the museum and make these tents to hide tanks and all kind of other machines and also people on the battlefield. And they were so much engaged in this activity, as many other museums and libraries and whatever cultural institutions started and keep doing now. And in the Hanenko Museum, which I finally know much better than some others, it was a museum that always sticked to this traditional Soviet, not only Soviet, classical European tradition that old historical museums of old art should show old art and nothing else, and only proper curators, educated curators who have their power for this museum over this collection can tell the truth, and no one else could. And only occasionally, when were pressed by the authorities due to some corruption schemes within our cultural infrastructure, we were doing some contemporary art exhibitions because it was politically or diplomatically grounded, but never let contemporary art into our premises. And the explanation was we do not have curators for it. So no one even thought that we can invite curators, we can invite professional from outside. No, it was totally the sphere of power of museum curators and managers of these concrete but several years before the full-scale war started, the new museum director opened up for contemporary art quite slowly and from time to time, but still experimentally. And now when the halls are emptied and there is no collection, the only thing actually that the museum shows is contemporary art now. And it's not only due to this situation, but also because museum is being rethinking itself as a place of actual sensitivity, actual thinking of exchanging with society and what can be a better exchange within society than through contemporary art. which in Ukraine has been since independence period very well active, provocative, discussable, but still since 17th?
Yeah, 1970s.
Oh yes, of course. Since 19th and even earlier probably, since this Renaissance, nation building and Ukrainian Renaissance period, when Ukrainian culture in this second decade of the 20th century became a part of direct part of Western European culture. Yes, but then it was tamed and actually censored and killed physically by the Soviet regime. And since independence period, since recent 30 years, it was very active, but never let into the classical museums. Now it is there, and I think it will stay there, even when we remount our new exhibitions, which will be different from the previous one, of course. So museum. Answer was, sorry for being so long speaking, my answer was museum get politicized a lot. Many museums. Finally, they acknowledged it and they went into this politics now.
Yeah, thank you very much. Yeah, I would like to thank all of you. It was very insightful. It was great. Thank you so much. I've learned again so much. Yeah, you can clap for yourself as well. And thank you also, Lee and Freya, again for the perfect organization of this evening. And now I also need to give the word to Lee, who would like to announce.
Thank you for this lively debate, and also thank you for coming. I just want to quickly teaser our next and last KuK Tuesday of this semester, which will be about queering archive, and this is a session that we co-curated with our dear colleague Merten Lagatz, and he will also moderate this session. And please do come it's in July on the 16th. So yeah, and now you can continue the lively debate over drinks and snacks. Thank you.